Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics is a useful tool for dissecting, well, comics. The author does a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of the vital elements of comics. Today, we will be analyzing how the vocabulary of comics and show and tell are utilized in the graphic novel edition of Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. The Handmaid's Tale is set in the fictional nation of the Republic of Gilead, which has overturned the United States government. Gilead came to power through a coup attempting to stop prostitution, pornography, declining birth rates, and violence against women. In doing so, they burned all books, stole all rights from women, and prohibited all subjects deemed sexual. A problem raging throughout the country is a rapid decline in birth rates. To solve this issue, selected women called handmaids are purposed to bear children. They are thought of as nothing more than vesicles for new life. Secret police called the Eyes track and limit the freedom of handmaids. Our main character, Offred, is a handmaid, but has broken to the Eye's psychological brainwashing. Through many flashbacks, the reader pieces together her life before Gilead. Offred, her husband Luke, and their daughter tried to escape Canada at the rise of Gilead, but were caught. Offred was separated from her family and sent to a re-education center, or Red Center for short, never to see her husband or daughter again. Offred is assigned to the commander and his wife, Serena, and begins a very repetitive and limiting routine. The only hope for the handmaids is to get pregnant, then they are granted several months of freedom. The commander isn't allowed to have a relationship with a handmaid, but the commander grows a liking to Offred anyways. He begins inviting her to secret meetings to play Scrabble and read old magazines that were not burned. At the end of each secret meeting, the commander asks Offred to kiss him. On a shopping outing with fellow handmaid Offglen reveals to Offred that she is in a secret organization called Mayday. Mayday's goal is to overthrow Gilead. Offred finds that the scheduled time between her and the commander is becoming more personal. The commander begins to speak about the condition of Gilead. Offred has not yet been impregnated by the commander. To resolve this, Serena suggests that Offred should have a child with Nick, the gardener, and pass it off as the commander's. She promises that in return, Offred can see a picture of her daughter. Offred realizes that this means Serena knew about her child the whole time. The night Offred is supposed to sleep with Nick, the commander takes her to Jezebel's, a club where she sees her best friend Moira working there. The commander takes Offred upstairs where they have sex in an old hotel room. She tries to fake interest. After returning from Jezebel's, Offred does the deed with Nick for the first time. They begin doing this regularly, which causes Offred to ignore Offglen's request for information on the commander. One day, the handmaids take part in a group execution. Later, Offglen tells Offred that the person they executed was a member of Mayday, who needed to be put out of his misery. Shortly after, Offred goes on a shopping trip. A new Offglen, who isn't a member of Mayday, tells Offred that the old Offglen hanged herself when she saw the Eyes coming for her. Serena learns of Offred's trips to the club and threatens her with punishment. Offred, while in her room, sees a black van of the Eyes approach. Nick tells Offred that the people in the van are Mayday members disguised as the Eyes coming to save her. The novel closes with an epilogue in the year 2195. A professor named Piazotto explains the forming and customs of Gilead and the importance of Offred's story. The vocabulary of comics is not just the words used in a given work, but the tools a creative uses to convey meaning in their story. In Chapter 2 of Understanding Comics, Scott McCloud covers how icons, stripping down images, and universality are essential for comics. If we get straight to the point about it, on page 27, McCloud states, "I'm using the word icon to mean any image used to represent a person, place, thing, or idea. I'm sure you could imagine why an image that represents any noun or idea would be an important tool in creating meaning in a graphic novel. A very surface-level icon is the handmaid's red garments. The red represents fertility and menstruation. The icon of the red garment brings meaning to the story by constantly reminding us of the uniform and oddly sexual nature of the greater system of Gilead. The icon of the eye reminds us of paranoia and surveillance. In the same way, stripping down an image can make it more iconic. The simpler an image is, the more identifiable it becomes. McCloud backs this up on page 30, stating, "When we abstract an image through cartooning, we're not so much as eliminating details as we are focusing on specific details. By stripping down an image to its essential meaning, an artist can amplify that meaning in a way that realistic art can't." On page 97, a beautiful dichotomy is depicted with 0 words and no background. This one image shows how the wives are put above the handmaids, the struggle of the handmaids, and the ridiculousness of the situation. By removing the background and focusing solely on people, the image amplifies the weight of the events transpiring. Without a background, the position of the different groups carries a lot more weight. It is clear that the wives are well above the handmaids, not only in position, but also status. The handmaids being on the floor shows that they are quite literally at the bottom. The removal of the background shows a clear representation of the ideals of Gilead. As previously mentioned, stripping down an image can create meaning and significance. Another idea McCloud touches on while speaking about stripping down is the universality of comics. Simply put on page 31, the more cartoony a face is, for instance, the more people it could be said to describe. You can't compare Offred to one person specifically. By making a character more simple, it is quite literally easier for the audience to see themselves in that character or in that character's shoes. This helps to create meaning by placing you in that character's situation or headspace. While abstraction and simplification are useful tools, they aren't the only ones. While stripping away details to focus on one image can amplify meaning, this is not the only way to achieve this effect. When creating a world to put the reader into, a realistic background can help like no other tool. The only way to have meaning in an impactful story is to have a believable and almost tangible world to place it in. The more realistic a world is, the easier it is to place yourself into that character's position.
In Chapter 6, Show and Tell, of Understanding Comics, Scott McCloud discusses the relationship between pictures and words. There are 7 categories of pictures combined with words: word-specific, picture-specific, duo-specific, additive, parallel, montage, and interdependent. For word-specific, pictures illustrate but do not significantly add to the larger complete text. We see this being used in The Handmaid's Tale on page 108. Offred and the commander play a game of Scrabble. The background is of the game, but the words convey the page's meaning. Words are written on top of it describing Offred's thoughts on this forbidden game. The commander can no longer play this game with his wife, so he asks Offred if he can play it with him. He's taking a liking to Offred and wishes to do activities of old with her. Offred describes this game as the first taste of freedom she has had in a long time. For picture-specific, words do little more than add a soundtrack to a visually told sequence. On pages 174 through 177, we see a sequence of images that details how Offred loses Luke and her daughter. Even without the use of words, the reader can see Offred's sheer panic as her daughter is taken away from her by soldiers. As the sequence continues, the color red becomes more notable. The leaves start to gather around, and in the last panel, a red abyss separates Offred and her daughter. This matches the red theme present throughout the novel. Duo-specific means that both words and pictures send essentially the same message. In The Handmaid's Tale, on pages 193 through 195, Maria explains her experiences after Gilead. The images show the aftermath of the war. A dark, burnt, destroyed city is all that is left. Bodies are piled as high as hills, and the cleaners are nearly bones. The words spoken by Maria give the same bleak story. She says the colonies are toxic dumps with radiation spills. They don't even bother to feed you much or give you protective clothing or anything. Both the words and images tell the same story. If one or the other was provided, the reader would still be able to get the same information. For additive, words amplify or elaborate an image, or vice versa. On page 33, we see 6 men hung on a wall. Around the necks of these men are fetuses, proposing that they are doctors who practice abortion. The dark imagery and expression on Offred convey a grim tone. The words are used to add more detail. Offred states, "What I feel toward them is blankness. What I feel is that I must not feel." This tells the reader that the hanging of these men disturbs her to the point where she cannot attempt to feel, otherwise she'll be overwhelmed with grief. The reader also learns about Offred's partner Luke as she says, "What I feel is partly relief because none of these men is Luke." The pictures alone show the dreary and bleak expression on her face, but the words offer insights to her feelings and Luke. In a parallel panel, words and pictures seem to follow different courses without intersection. On page 236, Offred follows the eyes into a van. With no correlation to the current events, she says, "There have been many purges among them. There will be more." The words and image are separate, conveying 2 things at the same time. In a montage, words are treated as integral parts of the picture. On page 61, Jane stands in front of the other handmaids and says that she has had an abortion. The crowd then starts chanting, "Her fault," and "Crybaby." The words are printed onto the picture, becoming part of the picture, making it a montage. And finally, interdependent. In interdependent, words and pictures go hand in hand to convey an idea that neither conveys alone. On page 227, the images show Offred walking through a flower garden. She's treading swiftly and stops to look at all the flowers who have handmaids being hung on them. The words describe Offred as frantic, saying, "Dear God, I'll do anything you like. I'll obliterate myself. if that's what you really want. She says that she doesn't want to be a doll hung up on a wall. She wants to keep on living. The pictures alone show Overhead walking through a garden with symbols of handmaids being hung, but the words help to convey her helplessness. The Handmaid's Tale is an extraordinary novel that speaks out about women's rights. With the help of Scott McCloud, we were able to dig deeper into the graphic novel, picking apart why it has such a profound effect on the reader. The stylistic approach and use of words combined with images all help to convey the book's message. Hopefully, this was informative and you learned tools to understand more graphic novels.